Right. I'd like to welcome you all here to our roast and toast of Ralph Bean. That's how Paul thinks of it. Thank you very much. And the union makes us strong. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for your presence to honor our friend Ralph. As I've said to Paul, I feel like we've been getting ready for his bar mitzvah. And Paul said, well, it's a good thing, he's already been circumcised. I've been so nervous about this. I feel like the mother of the bar mitzvah boy.
They didn't tell you was a male, did they?
No, actually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all whether he's been circumcised, Mary Ellen. This reminds me of a story. It reminds me of my first year at Stockton in 1976, when at the faculty assembly, Ralph was making one of his impassioned but brief speeches, and Susan Matthews leaned over to me and said, "Can you imagine that voice on the pillow beside you?" Well, actually, I couldn't. So I have no idea.
Well, let me tell you, Penny.
This is a very good segue until back from retirement, exile, whatever you'd like to call it, to host this event. We tried to get Billy Crystal, but he heard we were competing, he was competing with Tony Marino, so he backed out. Tony used to teach a course in human sexuality, and I have heard that some of those films are still around somewhere. And anyway, Tony was one of the founding fathers of Stockton, as they refer to themselves. But we let them do it, don't we, girls? Because they have their illusions. So, and Tony now works for the Atlantic City Highway Authority. He's no longer a member of the union, but despite that, he still has very strong union sympathies, especially for former union presidents. He has a lot of sympathy. So Tony will host this event. Okay?
Good evening, Penny. The only thing in this room that can be sure whether Ralph is circumcised or not is his hand. That's what I'm told. And so, starting on such a high note, that's why I was brought here tonight. There's a lot of people in the room that know me, and then there's again a lot of people in the room who don't know me. I was part of the original faculty at Stockton back in 1971. I quickly adopted Ralph as my mentor, and 5 years later I got fired. So some things I understand never change at Stockton, but I am proof that there is life without tenure. I've done quite well in the intervening years. I taught I was 5 years at Stockton, and then spent 3 years as the full-time staff rep for the SFT senior organization upstate. Tom Worth and I, two former Stockton members, were up there for many years as the only two staff guys. And then in 1979, I got very smart. I left the union and got into management, public sector management. So I've been semi-retired since 1979. I work for the local authority that operates the Atlantic City Expressway, the Atlantic City International Airport. And it's fitting that I come here 2 days after we announced that it looks like we may have to have the first toll increase on the expressway in 31 years. So I'm sure that ingratiates me with those people in the room. My role tonight is just to try to keep things moving, try to stay within the normal faculty assembly speaking limit, which is, I understand, 5 hours. So some things haven't changed, even though Shelby Broughton's retired, things still go forward like that. You know, before I begin introducing people, I'll try to interweave as I stand here some fond remembrances of the early Stockton that some of you may not know of. I know some others will probably address that. In my case, my fondest memory of Ralph is when I came here in March '71 for an interview with Woody Thromley, who was then the Dean of Social and Behavioral Sciences, a wonderful man. And I was a young fellow. I was in my 32nd year in graduate school at Cornell, waiting for the Vietnam era to end. And when I came down in March '71, Woody, this courtly Southern gentleman, interviewed me. And he said, you know, over here in social behavior sciences, we're going to have a lot of young faculty, but some of the other units are hiring some seasoned fellows. And said, there's one over there in NAMS, a guy named Ralph Bean. I really want you to meet him. He's such a wonderful, impressive guy. That time I couldn't, and throughout the summer, as I kept in contact, because I was teaching or something up at Cornell at the time, Woody would say, oh, you got to get down here. The NAMS faculty came in early, and they're playing softball, and this guy, Ralph Bean, is leading them on, and he's such a wonderful guy. So when I finally got down here in late August, one of the first people I sought out was Ralph, and I forget who introduced me. It may have been Dan Mowry, the dean of that unit, and he said, this is Ralph Bean, and I looked at him, and you can understand how disappointed I was. But you know, I finally got over that, and I guess we all have. It's now, what, 26, 27 years later. Ralph didn't look young then, and he certainly looks no younger now. It's certainly symbolic that we're meeting with the AARP symbol on here. I'm a card-carrying member, and recommend that organization. Ralph is president of the senior division, I understand. But there'll be other things to say as the night progresses. Now there's a whole bunch of speakers, and anybody is free to come here and speak. Paul has you know, given me this list. I remember when he contacted me a couple weeks ago and he asked me would I be willing to host a testimony for Ralph. My first impression was, geez, I hadn't heard he had died. But Paul assured me he hadn't. But I hope after some of these speeches tonight, Ralph would hope that he had died and wasn't here to hear all that. Having said all that, let's get to the program, and our first presenter will be John Seawright. John, come on up.
Thank you very much, Tony. In hearing you talk, I guess I've just forgotten how much pleasure it was you were to the early years at Stockton and to a number of things that we've had since then. I'm going to be fairly serious tonight. I'm listed as a toaster rather than a roaster. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry.
typo.
And I do have, I have a number of things here that I want to share with you. And I'm going to start with a couple of letters that I have. And the first is a letter that mysteriously appeared under my door today. I happened to go out to Stockton and there was a letter under my door. And I'm going to share it with you. Dear Dr. Bean, I have been informed by reliable sources that you are being honored tonight. Please know that I would most certainly be present, but other commitments make that impossible. I've been working day and night for the good of Stockton. Why, in the past week alone, I've had calls from 4 states, 2 countries, and 7 college presidents, all asking me how we buck all the national trends at Stockton. I tell them it all starts with having a faculty I truly love. One that makes us the envy of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. I tell them we have a faculty that has peers, but no equals. Dr. Bean, I want you to know that you truly have peers, but no equal. I want you to know that I truly care deeply about you and have never meant you or any member of the Stockton faculty any harm. I think about this all the time. I even pray about it. Now, we do have this minor disagreement, but again, I mean no harm. You should know I am bearing all the expenses of this myself. It's a private matter and one that can be easily resolved. Easily resolved. Just turn this event tonight into a retirement celebration. I also want you to know that it would never have happened if that letter had not been written and distributed to the world through the internet. That letter. Speaking of letters, I want also to address your concerns about the confidential document. Please know that I did not write it. While I do admit it was in my office, there was only one copy, and it was stolen. And then it was altered. And then it was distributed to the faculty. I seem to remember that you, Dr. Bean, were the one to distribute it. What does that mean? Why is it always you that is the one who stands up at the Board of Trustees meetings and makes those nasty statements and wants everyone to resign? Dr. Bean, I really want to understand you, but it's difficult. I'm told that you are interested in educational philosophy and that you are radical in your views, but I don't know what that means. I'm also told that you regularly appear at the office doors of either Professor Stephen Dunn or Professor Michael Frank, and that you go in and the door closes and you don't come out for 30 minutes or so. Are you discussing educational philosophy, or are you doing something else? I'm told that the sounds of cards being shuffled can occasionally be heard. Excuse me, I'm forgetting myself a bit here. I want to close by wishing you my personal best for a successful evening with all those wonderful Group 3 adversarial people. Sincerely, Vera King Ferris. Okay, thank you. The second letter is a real letter. One of the founding fathers of Stockton, and a person who retired a number of years ago and has gone to the world of golf and lives in Boca Raton, Florida. And this is from Jerry. It's hard for me to believe that it's been over 25 years since Ralph Bean and I and a whole gang of other academic hippies came together in Atlantic City to start Stockton State College's first year. We were a motley crew of idealists, fed up with traditional modes of higher education, entranced by the idea of starting a college from scratch, and each of us having a somewhat different notion of what such a college would look like. We were a very informal group, a lot of long hair and beards, and peace symbols. The standard garb for the faculty was jeans and a t-shirt with an appropriate anti-authoritarian slogan and/or symbol. During the first construction phase, some of the students used to point out that you could always tell the male faculty from the construction workers, because the faculty members were the ones wearing the construction boots. Even so, it seemed a little strange to find that the mathematics coordinator looked like a character from Greenwich Village or an artist's colony, and that in our first conversation he would indicate that he wanted to teach a course in literature, preferably Dostoevsky, if he could ever learn how to spell the name. Those were heady early days of general studies, when nobody was supposed to teach any subject they knew anything about. I was in better shape than most, because for me that meant the whole field was wide open. Ralph is supposed to be a great teacher, and there's no question about that. However, he's had his share of failures, and I can testify firsthand about one of them. I once indicated to Ralph that I was math illiterate, that I had passed high school algebra only by promising the teacher that I would never take another math class. Ralph at that time did not accept the theory that some people, the mathematically challenged, are born lacking the gene that makes it possible to understand mathematical concepts. So Ralph bet me a bottle of scotch that if I would sit in on his general studies course, I think he called it the wonderful world of mathematics, he would show me how easy and simple it was to learn about algebra and other exotic mathematical goodies, maybe even calculus. For the first 10 minutes of Ralph's first lecture, I listened with interest and pleasure. He was actually talking English. Of course, he was only talking about his grading policy and extolling the general studies program, and probably bad-mouthing our first president, stuff that both of us did frequently. But then he started talking math, and I began hearing words like integers and vectors and matrices, and straight lines and symbols began to appear in the blackboard. And my mind went back to high school, and Ralph Bean began to sound and even look like Miss Becker, my high school algebra teacher. I began to suffer the symptoms of post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I fled screaming from the classroom, a quivering shell of my former self. The next day, I found a bottle of scotch on my desk and a note with the words, "I give up." I'm also not too sure about Ralph's abilities as a mathematician. The longest running faculty group at Stockton by the time I retired was the monthly poker group, which Ralph and I started the first year. Now, it's already been established that I'm no mathematician, but as a semi-serious poker player, I've learned a few things. For example, I know the mathematical odds are not good about drawing 2 cards to a 5-card straight, but Ralph not only defied all the odds and tried it again and again, but he frequently made it, usually when I was sensibly gambling against him. His explanation? I felt lucky. Now, what kind of a mathematician is going to base his behavior on luck? I thought mathematics was supposed to be logical, rational, and all that. For Christ's sakes, Ralph played poker like a humanist or an artist, doing whatever felt right at the moment. Well, enough about me and Ralph. I don't get much news from New Jersey down here in Florida, but my son David, who lives in Hamilton, sent me a clipping a few months ago which informed me that President Vera Ferris had sued Ralph for libel. And I had a hard time dealing with that. The one thing I remember most about Ralph Bean is that he is probably the most honest and genuine human being I've ever met. So I figure he must be getting into trouble for telling the truth. That puts him in some pretty good company. Well, my fondest regards to all of you, especially all you survivors. Maybe I'll drop by for a visit on my next trip north. Jerry Ensko. I think in these 2 letters, we really have the essence of Ralph. The most honest and genuine human being I've ever known. And Jerry is an honest and genuine person himself, and he's met a lot of people in his long and distinguished life. Honest, the most honest and genuine human being I've ever known. And from the first letter, why is it you that's always standing up to say that we don't want to hear? I think the answer is because it's Ralph being Ralph. And the essence of Ralph comes out of a history and a context, and a life that's always been engaged and focused on upholding the rights of the threatened and the less powerful. And it all began in Atlantic City. In fact, I think that's very ironic. Our president, Vera Ferris, often invokes her childhood in growing up in Atlantic City. What some of you may not know is that that's where it began for Ralph. Ralph doesn't invoke his childhood, but this is where it all began. It was in Atlantic City where the spark was lit and the example was set. Ralph was born here, I think, in 1933. His father was a delivery man for Abbott's Dairies and tried to organize the drivers into a union. And he was fired and blacklisted. And he couldn't find a job. This was 1934, remember. So the Bean family had to leave Atlantic City. And who says that we don't follow in others' footsteps? Ralph's had many stops along the way before Stockton. He was in the Navy, University of Pittsburgh, and University of Maryland as a student. He was a tenured faculty member at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville in the 60s. And in Tennessee, Ralph was very involved in the civil rights struggle, and he was often at risk for his beliefs and for his activities. And so he arrived in Stockton in 1971, part of that initial group that Jerry so well describes. And it didn't take long for the bloom to come off the dream that a lot of people came here with. Skirmishes and then war with a tough and determined administration. And the Union was born after a hotly contested election. The AFT won, the SFT began, and a president was elected. That was Tom Worth, our first president, and someone I hope that's going to be able to be with us tonight. And then it really got tough. 6 faculty were fired, including Tom, our first president. And I think we need to remember at that point that all the faculty at this college were not tenured. Some strange things began to happen too. The college president's office was in a cabin on the shores of Lake Fred, and it burned down while the faculty was meeting in A-Wing, in the A-Wing lecture hall. I think there were some Army recruiters on campus that were asked to leave by way of a letter that was written on college stationery. This might sound familiar. And the person writing that letter, it wasn't Ralph. She was charged and tried for unauthorized use of college stationery. In the midst of this, Ralph stepped up and he became the second president of our union, and he led the effort to fight for and to protest for what we think is right and just. That was 25 years ago, and Ralph has really not stopped since. I want to share just a few snapshots with you from the past. It was in February of 1974 that we achieved our first contract with the state of New Jersey. They were difficult negotiations, a lot of trips between here and New Brunswick, and in fact that's how I got involved in our union. And we used to have a car. It was called well, actually it wasn't the union car, but we referred to it as the union car, and it was actually Ralph's car, an old car as I recall. And my first experience with the union, I think, was on a cold winter day, and I got in this automobile with Ralph driving, and Alan Townsend was in that car, and Tom Worth was in that car. Jerry Insco was in that car, and I don't remember, but I think Tony was in that car.
I was on the council.
Yeah. And that was my introduction to the union. It was also a pivotal event for me because it was the first time since I had been at Stockton that I felt like I had sort of stumbled across some real people that were really up to something and cared and were the kind of people that I could identify with. A lot of trips, a lot of work, a lot went into that first contract. We signed it in February of 1974. Little piece of trivia, it sort of got sealed in the end by a napkin. We talk about the napkin deal. Things were a pretty tough impasse, and there was a meeting in New York City one morning, and arbitration was written out as part of our grievance procedure, external arbitration, which we felt was absolutely crucial to having a contract, and it was all written out on a napkin. And our state president and the chief of staff, I think, of Brendan Byrne and Bob Bates, I believe, and Marco were involved in that. And so back came our contract basically on a napkin. And that was a big victory for us, and everybody in this room who's connected with Stockton continues to enjoy, I think, the fruits of that first effort. It wasn't too long after that, however, that we went on strike. And I find it very interesting that it was exactly 23 years ago that we were on strike. It was Thanksgiving week. In fact, we went out on November the 18th of 1974. And we were on strike for 8 days. And we settled on Wednesday. And part of the settlement had to do with being, I remember this vividly, had to do with being paid for Thanksgiving Day and for Thanksgiving Friday. So we were out for 2 weeks, we were on strike for 8 days, but we got 2 days pay, and we settled. That strike was about principle. It was about the fact that the state wouldn't recognize us and be serious with us as far as reopening for their new contract. We had settled just a few months before, and they basically were ignoring us. So we were saying to them, look, you got to take us seriously. We're about business here, and we're a union, and we expect to be treated with respect and dignity. And that was quite an event, but it was 23 years ago, and that's one kind of snapshot. I remember we had a series of daily meetings in the evening at the church in Pomona. And again, Ralph Bean was at the head of those meetings, and Ralph Bean stood up there and took on the concern, the anxiety, the machinations, the rationalizations of a faculty as to why we shouldn't be doing this, what was going to happen to us, and how is this going to end, and we better get back in, and what about our students, and so forth and so on and so on. But it was Ralph that was up there every night, and Ralph kept us together, and he kept us strong. We were always waiting for this guy with a cigar. I never quite knew what that was about. It was this man with a cigar who was going to appear, and I don't think he ever appeared. I guess that had something to do with, again, another male figure in the union movement who was going to come down and visit us. But anyways, it was Ralph. Ralph kept us together. Another thing I remember very clearly from the early years was Ralph and our first or second board of trustees. Ralph has this habit, I guess he's never been able to get out of it, of going to board meetings and standing up and saying what he thinks. And he kept telling this board and our first president, Dick Bjork, that this wasn't right. But Ralph doesn't use a lot of words. I mean, he says things pretty directly. And he kept saying, as I recall, this is insane. This is insane. This makes no sense. This is insane. And I used to kid him about how often he would invoke insanity and that this is insane. But Elizabeth Alton and Dick Bjork both heard from Ralph in a very regular and consistent way. Another thing I remember, and I was a little involved in this myself after that first contract and that first strike, were the early grievances that we had. Grievances that we filed and we fought, and in some cases we won because of that external arbitration. We were able to get some decent rulings. We fought some of the fights that laid out due process rights for faculty in the review process. Reasons being given, no more bolts out of the blue, which is specific to Stockton, and days of surprises, and we had those grievances. And we had an evaluation of tenured faculty grievance also, and we had a very interesting thing go on here in the first 10 or 15, maybe 10 years of the college, which is that even after you got tenure, you got an annual letter of reappointment. Now, it was called a letter of confirmation of your tenure, but it came every year. It struck us as rather odd, once having been tenured, that we get these letters every year. But it was part of our Dick Bjork's view on tenure, and he didn't like tenure. In fact, he wrote a number of papers in the early 70s about why we shouldn't have tenure. But we had an early grievance on the evaluation of tenured faculty long before the current situation that we're involved in. And we won that. We won that in a big way. When basically the arbitrator said that the college president was not telling the truth. I think he used the word Yeah, circumlocution. First time I ever saw that word. But that's what he said about our president. But through all this, it was Ralph, and it's still Ralph. A final snapshot I guess I would share is just from a few weeks ago when Ralph and I were at the offices of Ed Jacobs, his attorney. And as we were leaving, the receptionist at the office recognized Ralph, and as we were leaving, she says, "Professor Bean, that was a great course. I really enjoyed it." And outside, I asked Ralph, "What course was that?" And Ralph said, "That was my general studies course on peace and conflict studies." Very interesting. Let me close with this. I sometimes think about what I would do if a real moment of truth would arise at Stockton, and if I was about to face genuine trouble. There are 3 or 4 people that I would want to consult and that I would want to be at my side. And they're all in this room tonight. All of them. But if I had only one phone call to make, it would be to Ralph. Ralph, we respect you. We back you 100%. We stand with you in solidarity. We love you.
Thank you, John. Alan, you're over 50. You go to the bathroom 3 times an hour, just like I do now. See the letter, and I immediately eliminated Ralph as a possible writer for 2 reasons. It was grammatically correct, and there were no misspellings in it. Actually, it was Candy Falk. Everyone remembered Candy Falk. What a wonderful person. I'm sure she remembers Ralph. She was one of our leaders in the union, too. Our next presenter is sometimes known as a poet, but I understand in Atlantic City his real reputation is as a blackjack maven, the mogul of blackjack. Steve Dunn.
Well, John's wonderful talk made me remember that I arrived in 1974 not thinking of myself as a union person at all. I had never thought like that, and found myself, I think, just by instinct on the picket lines. And I think probably all my friends from then on were the people who were on those picket lines. And the ones who weren't were not. It just worked that way. It's tempting to say that I've known Ralph in more positions, so to speak, than even Mary Ellen has known him in.
But I doubt it.
And have often felt the need to exclaim, as no doubt she has as well, "Oh, Ralph." To have known Ralph as a colleague, poker player, friend, union man, to have known him on the ball field and on various courts, as a Scrabble pretender and as a good troublemaker, is to often have those words in my mouth, "Oh, Ralph." That I've missed out on a few positions and situations that Mary Ellen has known with him. For he is best known for other work. Each is a son of something. Each in his own way has wished to save us. "Oh, Ralph," I found myself saying every time he wrote a Professor Trueheart letter. "Oh, Ralph," when he addressed Vera directly and signed his own name. "Oh, Ralph." On the racquetball court, when he misses a shot, even Ralph says, "Oh, Ralph." Perhaps he should be thought of as some kind of ersatz Irishman, "Oh, Ralph Bean." But I've come to praise Ralph tonight and to honor him as we all have. I recently realized that I couldn't think of a thing Ralph has done over the years that was self-aggrandizing. And then I thought I knew no one else about whom that could be said. All the things he's done have either been to help others or to expose some hypocrisy or unfairness or some abuse of power. It's an astonishing record. The other day, a former student, a woman now in her 30s, told me she was having identity problems. Her comments implied that she thought identity was something you could find by properly thinking about it. Do you ever know who you are? She wondered. Well, I'd been thinking about Ralph, and this evening I told her finally that you're the sum of your deeds, not so much what philosophy you've espoused or the talk that you've talked, but what you in fact have done. That's who you are. If that's true, then one says, "Oh, Ralph," as I say it now with deep respect. Trueheart was an accurate name for him. I feel lucky to have had him in my life.
Thank you, Steve. Our next speaker is perhaps the only bona fide Trotskyite that has ever served on the council of Egg Harbor City. Ken Harrison.
Well, I'm here to tell you something different. This is all nonsense. I know Ralph. I lived at Ralph's house my first year here after I told him that my friend had been fired for being against the Vietnam War at Potsdam State, and I was here and I wanted to join the Union. And he said, okay, and then he talked me later on into, along with John Seawright, to being president without tenure. Now I'm here further to inform you that Ralph cheats. He doesn't cheat at some things, he cheats at everything. For example, he cheats at Scrabble. And he knows what I'm going to say here too. He once thought that goatee was a word. G-O-A-T-Y. It is not a word. Something does not smell goatee. He tried to get away with it. And we wouldn't let him. Remember, Stephen? He cheats at racquetball. He pushes Michael. He pushes, you know that. Both Michaels. Michael Frank and Michael McGarvey know that I'm correct, that he cheats. He denigrates your game. For example, you shouldn't do those ceiling shots because it's not really fair. That's when I stopped playing with him. And he muscles you out of the center spot and claims that it's legal. So he cheats. He cheats at everything. But it's a good cheat. I don't know how to explain that, but it's a good cheat. And so I decided to get even with Ralph. And so after spending many evenings eating at his house, the first year I was here, probably 3 out of the 7 nights, he ate at my house for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And I concocted a scheme. You're not in this, don't worry.
I know what is though.
I concocted a scheme to really hurt him because he cheats. And the scheme I concocted was very clever. Ralph's a man of habit. And so every Sunday at our house he would bake some bread. And it was below average bread. He cheated. It was a sourdough bread. Awful. But Don Lauder and myself said it was wonderful. So the way you make bread, as I understand it, is if you're making it all the time, you have a yeast thing, and I don't really know how to explain it, but you have this yeast thing, and one day no, it's not a yeast infection, it's a yeast thing. There's a bunch of yeast. I don't know how this works. And so one day,
Yogurt helps.
I threw out his yeast that had been yeasting, if that's a word, probably a good Scrabble word, for about 3 or 4 years. And so, how many? 15. 15 years. I was never good at math. And so I threw it out to get even with Ralph. And I did some other things, but I'll have to wait for that for the retirement dinner to tell you that, because I can't tell you now. And it has to do with Mary Ellen, but I'm not going to talk about it. Anyway, I got even with Professor Bean. And I just want to say this. By the way, thank you for coming. And thank Rick Romanelli for the delicious dinner. Thank you, Rick, very much. But I'm just going to say in a shorter soliloquy than Mr. Seawright, who is excruciatingly boring, especially if you ride up to him, with him, to the union meetings and hear the famous toothbrush stories. And I'm not going to bore you with that here, but he has a very long story about toothbrush, and thank you very much, John, for that. And he doesn't drive very well either. In any event, Ralph, you know what we're all going to say. We're all saying the same thing here. We love you. And thanks for being Ralph.
John, you're welcome to come rebut Ken if you wish. I mean, there's the guy. He's the organizing genius behind the... Ken, I notice up in Ahern time the Democrats win all the seats and get back into control. At this point, let me quickly remember a story about Ralph. Ralph has always had this way of ingratiating himself with Stockton presidents. And I was thinking about our first president, Dick Bjork, who many of us remember with a great deal of fondness. In our very first negotiating session, we had just organized the union. We had won the election locally, and we were in local campus negotiations. And Ralph, of course, was the head of the negotiating team. And we went over to the president's cabin to do two things: negotiate the contract and also wonder where the combustibles were located. But the negotiating team consisted of Ralph as the leader, myself, Alan Townsend, Len Solo, and Tom Worth. Now, if you think about it, the only guy who remained at Stockton was Ralph. The rest of it was not the right thing to do. But the highest point of that first session was Dick Bjork was talking about his management philosophy. And he was saying there's no such thing as security. There shouldn't be tenure. My job as president of this college is to make sure each and every year I have the best, most qualified faculty. And if that means every year I have to advertise for each and every one of your positions, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's my obligation. We're all looking at each other, and Ralph sits there and he says, well, you know, Dick, if that's true, I think I'm going to write an ad right now for the president of Stockton St. Helens and put it in the local press. You know, we're all hankering down, and Dick looks at Ralph and goes, You know, Ralph, you have a tendency to take an example too far. The next speaker is Dave Emmons. Dave, this is someone I don't know. Oh, hi, Dave. All the other guys are all the old fossils in Stockton. Glad to see some new blood. There is coffee available. Why don't we let Dave make his presentation, then we'll take a break. Again, this is going to be about half as long as a normal faculty assembly meeting, so as Eleanor Curie once told me, I was suited to be a negotiator because he always thought I had a concrete ass. You know, I could sit through those meetings.
He said concrete head is what he said.
Be gentle with me, this is my first time. John, thank you for your remarks, your humor. Are you on a Tuesday-Thursday schedule by any chance? Steve, that was wonderful, but you're a poet, it didn't rhyme. It should be head, read, said, dead. Tony, I know you don't know me. I'm Mr. Criminal Justice at Stockton. Actually, I see Larry Nutt here, so I'm Mr. Criminal Justice Jr. I know you, for a long while, taught a course in organized crime.
I lived it.
That's well. You know, my criteria for hiring is if your last name begins with a syllable, you can teach that course. It begins with a vowel, you can teach that course. Ralph, I have a message from the president. She wants you to stop by after this affair is over and pick up your tool chest. She understands how to use the hammer, the screwdriver, the chisel, but she needs help on the level. I, in fact, am here as the official designee of Vice President Nazaro, who, as you all know, is the director of the Center for Vice Presidents. And I have been authorized to read the following memo to you all. This is a memo to the faculty on the occasion of Ralph Bean's roast from the little skipper, as we all call him. The Vice Admiral in her Queen's Navy, Captain of Her Majesty's Ship of Fools, and Director of the Center for Vice Presidents. And the memo reads as follows. You will recall my communique to Professor Bean April 27th, 1997, on, quote, the unauthorized use of college stationery, unquote. That directive was in response to Professor Bean's nasty broadside, what we at the center refer to as a Beano, to the Board of Trustees, criticizing the President, the Board's conduct, and all manner of other things. I informed President Bean in my memo that his, quote, use of letterhead stationery for a personal letter is unauthorized and prohibited by the campus conduct code, unquote. Well, let me tell you, the faculty reaction to my memo was a veritable tsunami of confusion, a lunar high tide of angst and doubt. I therefore convened the task force in the proper use of college stationery. After 6 months, that group's ship has returned to port from the high seas of deliberation, ready to unload its cargo of insight. Inspired by the task force, I have penned the following rule governing the use of college stationery. The vision behind the rule, the wind in the sails, so to speak, is that the negative is always personal. Therefore, faculty must at all times use personal stationery when referring to or discussing negative numbers, chaos theory, subtraction, zero, electrons and other negatively charged atomic particles and subparticles, black holes, negative reinforcement, non-aligned nations, negative campaigning, the null hypothesis, Pearson's R if it is less than plus or minus 0.15, critical mass, critical thinking, critical theory, the new criticism, Sartre's being and nothingness, and finally, creation myths that refer to, quote, the void, unquote. 3 distinguished faculty fellowships will be available for those who wish to come up with other negativities that should be banned from college letterhead stationery. If this rule doesn't steer us back on course, if we veer too close to the rocky shores, as it were, I am seriously thinking about tougher measures, specifically a ban altogether on the words no, not, never, und nein. We must avoid the briny deep. We must be buoyed up at all times, afloat in the light. We must be a negative-free school, a happy harbor, where faculty and student alike have only smiles and where we think only positive thoughts. This is your captain speaking. Now, I've also been authorized by Ralph to make a second brief announcement. And that is that he and the president have reached an accommodation. The president's suit will be dropped. Ralph's countersuit will be dropped. Ralph has graciously conceded to the president's demands. We shouldn't be surprised, given Ralph's quick willingness to abandon principle at a return, given his interest in the big bucks, given his obsession with publicity, given his yearning to be an administrator, given his determined pandering to those in higher authority, given his passionate love for large-scale organization and modern bureaucratic procedure. Given all of those things, we should not be surprised that he has agreed to the president's terms, and here they are. 1, Ralph will organize, host, and personally finance a conference next year at Stockton celebrating, and this is actually the only factually correct thing I've said, celebrating the 200th anniversary of one of the legislative high points of American history, the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. Ralph will give the John Adams Memorial Plenary Address, which is entitled Slamming the President and Other Forms of Treason. 2nd, Ralph will occupy until his retirement or expirement, whichever comes second, the newly created Norman Vincent Peale Chair of Positive Thinking and Mathematics, where he will devote his time to counting his many blessings. 3rd, he will finally install the long-awaited teak parquet floor at the president's mansion. The president, for her part, has agreed to finance and mount a showing at the PAC, free of charge to all Stockton faculty, staff, and their families, of Ralph's new movie, Mr. Bean.
Thank you, Dave.
Ralph's very significant other, or main squeeze. Actually, Ralph and I are a very unlikely pair, and most people are still wondering how we ever got together. I can't see my paper. I am a, relatively speaking, conservative Republican, and Ralph adds new meaning to the words bleeding heart liberal. My first memory of Ralph was seeing him. You're still fucking the working class. My first memory of Ralph was seeing him in the halls of Stockton in these really tough tough crew. It's a tough crowd. I'm not going to make it. They had too much to drink at the break. Okay, my first memory of Ralph was seeing this man in the halls of Stockton in these funny-looking sandals, which as a Republican I did not recognize as Birkenstocks. However, I've learned what they are since. In the early days of our relationship, Ralph's idea of dressing up was to wear a white shirt with his jeans and his Birkenstocks. After 10 years together, we've had a little impact on each other. I now sometimes vote for Democrats. And Ralph, although he still does not own a suit, does own a tuxedo. And in fact, earlier this evening, he was saying, you know, I think I'll wear my tuxedo tonight. And I thought, yeah. But then he changed his mind, so I didn't get that. Ralph loves slogans. If any of you have ever seen the rear end, not of Ralph, but of his car or of his truck, you will see that they are plastered, covered with slogans. He has a button proclaiming question authority. And that doesn't come as a surprise to anyone who knows Ralph. In fact, Ralph questions authority to the point of stubborn defiance. We can always trust Ralph to say it like it is, according to his view of things. And from what I've gathered, he's always been this way, and I suspect will always be this way. And so what follows is my rendition of A Brief History of Ralph. A true story. When Ralph was in 6th grade, he found himself once again in a new school. He was picked by the teacher to collect money for stamps for savings bonds. Each child was supposed to give 10 cents. So Ralph went around collecting the money for these savings bonds, and one child said, no, I don't want to give. And Ralph takes the child at his word. He reports back to the teacher, who said, was this a 100% collection? And Ralph said no. Billy said he didn't want to give. The teacher goes into a rage, and in front of the group tells Ralph, you are stubborn and defiant, and this is why none of the students like you. Please go out and stand in the hall. So this started at a very early age. A few minutes later, the teacher arrived in the hall with tears in her eyes, and she said, Ralph, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that to you. After you left, the students said to me, Mrs. Smith, you're wrong. We do like Ralph. So fast forward to the University of Tennessee. And we get together with one of Ralph's colleagues from there on occasion, and Rob and his wife Jane tell of Ralph daring the police to arrest him during civil rights demonstrations. Fast forward again to Stockton, where Ralph has quite a track record of questioning authority, as you've already heard tonight, often putting himself on the line when others of us were afraid to speak out. And I'd like to think tonight is our way of saying, you are wrong, Vera. We do love Ralph.
Yeah.
He would probably, my history isn't over, because while I was putting this together, and I said, you know, he'll probably always be defiant of authority, I had a dream. And I dreamed that Ralph and John Seawright and Stephen Dunn all died on the same day. And believe it or not, were presented at heaven before God, who was sitting on a large golden throne. And God turns to Stephen and he says, Stephen, my son, what have you done on earth to earn a place in heaven? And Stephen replied, Heavenly Father, I taught many years at Stockton, and during that time brought some class to that place. I was a poet and was very well known. I wrote beautiful poetry that everyone admired. And God said, well done, my son. Come and sit at my right hand. And then God turned to John, and he said, John, my son, what did you do on earth to earn a place in heaven? And John replied, well, Father, I also taught at Stockton and struggled for many years to be a real statesman. I frequently tried and succeeded in bringing some order to chaos. I worked tirelessly to make the institution work for the good of all. And God said, well done, my son. Come and sit at my left hand. Then God looked down upon Ralph and said, Ralph, my son, what did you do on earth to earn a place in heaven? And Ralph looked up at God and said, first, I am not your son. And second, you are sitting in my seat. Many years ago, Ralph and I took our first vacation together in Hawaii, and in a restaurant on the top of a mountain in Kauai, we discovered among some used books a novel written by a former colleague of Ralph's who got in trouble with him, as I understand, at the University of Tennessee. It was a wonderful read, and when we had finished with it, I sent it to some friends in Tennessee who I thought would enjoy it. Ralph was very distressed when he found out that I had given away his book. And I have felt very guilty about that, Ralph, and I want you to know that I have replaced it. And I would like for you to come up here and read the inscription on the front page. We share a lot.
To my good friend Ralph Bean, in token of those happy to my good friend Ralph Bean, I am seeing Richard Marius.
Read it.
In token of those happy and wonderful years when we did good together at the University of Tennessee, Richard Marius, November 1997, and I still don't understand topology. It's a new one.
I don't know if you've noticed Ralph, as people have been speaking, Ralph has been writing. And I looked over his shoulder, and at one point he wrote, "I'd rather be with Vera." Speaking of that, those of you who may not know, there's a young lad that's on the professional staff at Stockton. His name is Alex Marino. He doesn't look anything like me, but he is my son. And it's, you know, the old thing of what goes around comes around in the weird chain of life. As a 4-year-older, Alex, that day I had to do some childcare for Alex, and it was the day I got arrested as part of my activities at Stockton. There was a warrant out for my arrest by the Galloway Township Police. It involved a fracas the day before the basketball game, the faculty basketball team versus a basketball team, an intramural team led by Don Bragg, good friend of Ralph, the then athletic director. And supposedly in the course of this game, I punched out a poor old student, poor young student. So they sent out it was all part of a plot that we later traced right back to the president's office. But I worked out a deal through my union, good old union. Tom Worth at that time was working upstate as the union. He came down. Of course, in those days, we were such a raucous group. We had an attorney on retainer, Joe Wilkins from Brigantine. He came out, he advised me, and they accompanied me to be mugged. What do they call it? Booked and mugged and so forth. But I had my 4-year-old son along with me, and the then campus security chief, his name was Phil something or other, I forget his name. Nice fellow, retired FBI director. He had a real high nasal pitch and talked like Howdy Doody or something. But he was a nice fellow, and I asked him, could I bring along my son? And he said, oh, this was highly irregular, but they put me in the car, and there I am with Tom Worth on one side of me, my 4-year-old son Alex on the other side. I'm all taken up to Galloway Township, where they proceed to fingerprint me. My son's playing with the fingerprints and everything else. And they take a mugshot at me, of me, and somebody points a camera at me, I smile. And the police officer said, you don't smile when you take a mugshot. And my son's behind him going like this. And he takes a second shot, and I smile again. I mean, this was highly irregular. It was really a mess. It really was a mess. But that son, Alex, having witnessed that, our union days and everything else, Dick Bjork, if he still were alive, you would think it's all a plot. That son went on to get a master's degree in higher education administration at the University of Denver. Chuck Tantillo, an old nemesis, hires him, or helps to hire him, as assistant director, or he's assistant to the director of teacher development. He got married last month to the daughter of a prominent local Republican, and has just bought a house in Linwood. I don't know where the hell I went wrong, but the kid is, it's just absolutely amazing. Those who knew me in those days. And good old Alex, little Alex, Shelby, you remember little Alex?
Sure.
He's now an NTP at Stockton, and he's about ready to move into Linwood with his daughter. Pardon me? I'm sorry, I'm using old terminology, NTP, non-teaching professionals, it's now professional staff. Must have been one of the reforms that Ralph introduced during one of his many tenures as president. In any event, let's keep moving on. We do want to get out here before Ralph's arteries harden. That's about the only thing that hardens these days. Let's get to I don't know, but I understand you went out and bought an industrial strength vibrator for his birthday. I don't. Remember, I used to teach you in sexuality, but now Mike Geller teaches it now. If you're looking for those porno flicks that I used to use, Ralph has them in his basement, I think. Cindy Giselle. Cindy? Where are you?
Probably not going to get this right. Is it working right?
Yes.
All right. Ralph, it's a real pleasure to be here tonight to get to speak about what I think about you. I should say that Ralph has been a special friend of mine for a long time, and he is a person to whom I look for guidance, not necessarily asking his advice, although he is always available for that, but because when I want to know what a person of good conscience would do, when I want to know what a good person would do, I look at Ralph and see what he's doing, and that's almost always a guide to what I should do. Not that I always do it, because I think Ralph is braver than most of us. But he provides that guide. And so before I say anything else about him, I want to say that others have spoken to his character and to his decency, but I don't think I have ever known a person who was so completely and genuinely what he was all the time. I have not seen a false note in Ralph, and I don't know too many of us about whom I can say that. I wish there were more of us. I wish there were more of you. Now, to get on to the case of why we're here tonight, first of all, I'd like to say there are so many people tonight who have said what a wonderful occasion this is, not only to celebrate Ralph's friendship and being his colleague, but that all of us are together to celebrate what we do collectively as a community, to be happy about where we work and who we work with. And sometimes, given the way things go in the halls at Stockton, we don't have as much occasion to remember that as we should. And this night, and I really thank all the organizers of this event for thinking of it on Ralph's behalf, but on behalf of every single one of us here. It's such a perfect fit that the night that we're celebrating Ralph is also a night that we celebrate our community and our feelings for each other. And I feel so very special to be here and to be involved with all of you in doing that. All right, having said the nice stuff, now let me get down to cases here. You know that letter that it is reputed that Ralph wrote on college stationery? There is no possible way that Ralph wrote that letter because it is entirely too long. Ralph never said anything in that many words since I knew him. I mean, you know, some of you may have seen his letters for files, promote him, hire her, take them, stuff this. I mean, Ralph is given to very simple and direct sentences with very simple and direct emotion, and as I said before, usually right. But I think that this has got to be a bum rap because it had entirely too much detail, and there were too many words involved. but the sentiment was surely right. And I think besides saying that we all support you as a person, I want to say, and I think I speak for a lot of people here, that we support what you said in that letter as well. It was not a lie, and you are not a liar. Good to be here, and I'm happy to be your friend and happy to call you my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. We have a few more presenters, and then we're going to have a real special treat with a musical ensemble. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Now we have two members of Ralph's family that are just chomping at the bit to say something about Ralph, his two sisters. I'm sorry, I can't. Joan and Judy, come on up. Your turn.
My brother's name to all of us is Dusty. I have never heard him called Ralph so many times in my entire life as I have here tonight. I finally got it in my head that maybe his name is Ralph. I remember, though, as a child, Dusty didn't like the name Ralph. And he said to me, when I was a little girl, Ralph is an awful name. It sounds like a dog. Ralph, Ralph. Dusty, I know you're not aware of this, but I have a little dog for Jamie that's a little cockapoo. Beautiful, beautiful little puppy, and we named him Ralph. I did it in honor of you, but there are some in our family who are very upset that I would do that. But I have to tell you, I did it in honor of you, and the neighbors think I bark like a dog. I go out and holler, Ralph, Ralph, and the dog comes. Anyway, that's just a little aside. This thing's moving all over here. Am I okay? Actually, I want to give you a message right now from someone very near and dear to you. If I can manage to open it up. And it presents as, good evening, everybody. I am speaking to you via proxy, but I am Justin Bean, Ralph's eldest son. When I was a young boy, my father used to sit me on his knee and tell me stories. He once explained to me very carefully how and why the chancellor and the president of Stockton College were acting like the enemies of education. He also explained what he had to do when he went away those many times to arbitrate, representing teachers and protecting the school. Well, a child's mind is different from an adult's mind. A child will not comprehend the entirety of a complex situation and will simplify his understanding. This was the case with me. This is how I came about presenting to you good people this story. The story of a child's view of his father. The story of Little Red Ralphing Hood. There once was a man much beloved to the faculty, but most of all by his grandmother, who lived in the middle of Pomona Wood. Red Ralph, as he became called, was given a very special red card by his beloved grandmother, and he carried his card everywhere he went. One day, Red Ralph's faculty, who lived on the other side of the wood, approached Ralph with a little errand. He was asked to represent the faculty at the bargaining table and to bring his grandmother some sort of contract. Red Ralph agreed to go. Ralph's family wept as Ralph dusted off his red card, headed off to grandmother's house to get a contract and avert a strike. As Red Ralph navigated the maze of state bureaucracy, the wolf snuck into grandmother's house, chased down and devoured grandmother whole. The big bad wolf, who had become named Big Bad Jerk, then went to grandmother's closet and began to disguise himself as grandmother. The wolf wanted very much to eliminate Red Ralph and protect the state coffers from overzealous union agitators, and the greedy pensioners they represent. Political winds blowing as they do, Red Ralph decided to peek into the window of Grandmother's house before he entered. He saw Grandmother conspiring with a judge to file an injunction. This made him very suspicious, and he sprang into the room. As Grandmother also leapt up, Red Ralph kept himself on the other side of the bargaining table. Ralph then noticed, "Oh, Grandmother, what big ears you have." The wolf answered, all the better to hear the bitter mumblings of lazy, tenured faculty. Ralph then observed, "Oh, Grandmother, what big eyes you have." The wolf answered, all the better to read the fine print of the contract with. Red Ralph then stepped back. "Oh, Grandmother, what big hands you have." All the better to hold hostage your academic freedoms like free speech. "But Grandmother, what big teeth you have." "All the better to swallow you up," said the wolf, and that is just what he did. It might have seemed to be the very end for little Red Ralphing Hood, but luckily he was a card-carrying member of the ACLU. And he whipped out his card and used it to slash through the wolf's gullet and free himself. The wolf had fallen asleep after such a satisfying meal, so Ralph was able to continue opening up the wolf's abdomen until Grandmother appeared completely unhurt. After wiping her eyes, she said, "Oh dear, how frightened I have been. It is so dark inside the wolf." When Grandmother witnessed the wolf being dispatched, she remarked, "Bye-bye, Björk," and secretly plotted on how to fill the power vacuum. She declared herself king and was later to be referred to as Vera King. Red Ralphing Hood and Vera King were to have many more adventures together, including more injunctions, providing many tales to tell the grandchildren. I would like to thank all of you for coming here tonight. Justin Day.
Okay, let me have that. Nicole first.
Hello, my name is Judy, and I'm Dusty's sister, Ralph's sister. I don't usually speak in public very much, so please bear with me. And I have the great honor of reading a letter from his daughter, Marina. About a week ago, I got a call from Mary Ellen updating me on Ralph's affairs with Vera and informing me about this evening. She asked me to say a few funny words or embarrassing tales about Ralph, or Dusty, as he's known by his family. Well, this is no easy task. Why couldn't she just ask me to ridicule his friends, I thought. Surely it would be far easier for me to make fun of Joe or Steve than of my dad. For anyone, making fun of Ralph is, in my mind, somehow like stealing candy from a baby, and at the same time like threatening the president. Cruel, and anyway against the rules. He is my precious dad after all. Besides, let's face it, Ralph is not a particular absurd man. He doesn't don obnoxious feathered hats, ride about on yachts in the Atlantic with members of high boards. He doesn't imagine his children to be royalty. No, his illusions are more humble. He drives used cars and trucks in his dungarees, imagining only that his children might someday earn advanced degrees and get respectable jobs, so they could be free to cruise the Caribbean with an independent, sensuous, Republican form of all places, Texas. Let me say only this about Ralph. Watch out. He is much smarter than he seems. My dad is an actor, indeed, and his favorite disguise is that of an oblivious man, a carefree atheist a cruiser, a freelance carpenter who doesn't bother with aesthetics or heavy gauge electric wire. He appears cavalier. He will act shy as he elicits your praise, the humble hand. His true person is a mystery. My husband believes that my dad is, in secret, a wizard. He came to this conclusion late one night when I awoke to tell him of a dream I had in which Ralph gave his kids potions that made us fly to psychedelic lands. Brant explained, "That's it, your father is a wizard." Think of it. Think of that face. The mathematics, the impossible union contracts, the Scrabble, the way he finds solutions as if he looked them up in a secret handbook. We're going to have to corner him. Ralph will say, "We know you're a wizard." I responded that my dad would react dumbly, as if we were nuts to suggest such a thing. "Yes," Brant said slowly, "that's just what a wizard would do." Since then, I like to think of Ralph as a wizard, holding the secret to the shapes of the universe with his modular eclipses and cryptic expressions. Let me finish with a quick story I asked my dad's brother Larry one time about their side of the family, about Dusty's roots. "Uncle Larry, we're Hicks, aren't we?" My dear uncle has a mulish but attractive face. He grinned and thought for about a second. Well, we ain't aristocrats, but Hicks are from the country and we're from the city. Then again, beans were always a good meal, and wine with the cork top was impressive, but a pain in the ass. They ought to put screw tops on those things. Please send my respectable dad my love.
This is Jessica Cuevas, right?
Yes,
Former student.
thank you.
You want to also say something? I just want to say, Ralph, Dusty? I can understand musty, maybe.
Well, Ralph, to round it out, we have to hear from Adrian, too. These words are from his son, Adrian. He's broken his letter up into subheadings, and the first subheading is Cub Scouts and Little League. As the youngest kid, I enjoyed certain privileges. When I joined Little League, Pop became an umpire since the league was in dire need of umpires. He always was a sucker for a good cause. When I joined Cub Scouts, he became den father. One year, we were betrothed the go-kart that was to represent our pack in the soapbox derby. This, quote, car, unquote, was a sight. A plywood box frame with hokey little wheels. I don't know where it came from or what became of it, but I sure remember the race. I was all geared up since I was the driver. There was a stark difference between this car and all the other cars that were custom designed and painted like French rally cars. When it was my turn to race, I lined up against my opponent in a far superior car. Luckily, he choked and drove his car off the road in the first 10 feet. I had the race in the bag, or so I thought. As I got to the bottom of the hill, the friction of those silly wheels was stopping the cart. I tried my best, but I couldn't rock the car across the finish line. Needless to say, I was crushed. Ralph was right there for me, though. As an 8-year-old, I remember thinking, my dad is a great mathematician, but he's not the best mechanic. The next subheading is ospreys. Blessed Tuesday and Thursday evenings of summer, our famous shortstop. As the years flew by, those ground balls would get under his glove, and those line drives would get through to the outfield. How many times have I heard, Last year I would have gotten it. This was the case with the entire squad, not just Ralph. The entire I'm representing a different generation. The entire squad, except of course the second generation Beans and Taylors, who salvaged the team from extinction. We could still round the bases. One time Ralph got a hold of one and smacked the ball deep into left field. It would have been his first home run, but he stopped at third to rest. I have to say that Adrian's sister-in-law, Justin's wife, Terry, when she told me that I was going to read this story, said to me, "Jessica, you have to practice being sarcastic, because any of you who know me know that it's not in my nature, so it feels weird to read these things aloud," but she coached me. Okay, next subtitle. Have hammer, will travel. All those lessons learned. My first job, working on Steve Dunn's stable in Port, was pulling out old rusty nails out of boards. I took to it with 13-year-old zeal, only to find my 13-year-old frustration. After struggling for a while, Ralph finally came over to check on me. He took my hammer and effortlessly pulled out the nail I had been cursing at for the last 10 minutes. He then went on to explain that pulling nails were like proving theorems. What a geek, I thought. I was raised with good manners, so I kept my mouth shut and pretended to listen. There may be 100 ways to do it, but there's only one right way, the natural way. Every time I pull out a nail, I look at it for a second and see which way that nail will come out. Luckily, I don't look at too many proofs these days. Over the summers, we worked on lots of jobs, and I learned other valuable, quote, life lessons, unquote. As I got older, I became stronger and more experienced. When Dad got older, he became, well, more experienced. I would always try to save him work, since it was so hard for him, especially on those days when we'd be up and down ladders all day. I would jump off my ladder and get him a refill of nails in the time he realized he needed more nails. After a year or so, he realized what I was doing, and he would protest, "I can get it myself. I'm not dead yet." He's got that spunky bean temper down under that deep, deep voice. Another, quote, natural law, unquote, I learned was how to predict the rhythm of the cigarette breaks. I know exactly how long it takes to smoke a Camel, no filter. My most valued lesson I learned from Ralph was how to avoid secondhand smoke. And the last subtitle is high school. Thanks for the car keys, Dad. I mean truck keys. My favorite was the V8 jet black Ford pickup. All those soccer and basketball games and practices, and play practice, dress rehearsals, etc. You made all those hobbies possible. Thank you. Were you surprised that I quit college to pursue hobbies? You were the shining example of not working too hard and playing games all your life. Scrabble, push, racquetball, football, and basketball on TV. Yeah, my fatal flaw was trying to be just like my dad when I was only 20. Only I didn't have tenure. I was a bum while he was a full professor. Adrian writes, "It's such a fine line." Yeah, Ralph's life would have been perfectly stress-free had it not been for the administration, all in capitals. I heard so much about Bjork by age 7, I was filled with anti-administration propaganda. This all became clear to me when I cursed out the dean for no apparent reason in my freshman year of college.
Thank you, Jessica. Our next speaker is Claire Gerber, and then we'll go to Bill Daly. Bill, I remember you when you had hair, as a matter of fact. That's how far back we go. Yeah. Claire?
Well, we've all had a lot to eat. I will submit a little sandwich. With 2 bits of toast with slight roast in the middle. To begin with, and almost to end with, I've been around the Carters in college since 1973 with great books, which I have led twice a month with great enjoyment. And one time, not long ago in fact, I came upon this fellow, Ralph, that I had seen around and heard about. I never thought I'd get in conversation with him, but I did, and somehow we got on the subject of Scrabble. And the end of that is we have become friends, and I am very delighted to say that. That's the toast. Now the roast. He told me unequivocally that he is the best, was the best, is the best Scrabbler. And it has happened periodically, and perhaps not frequently, but enough that he has lost a couple of games, and I can only think, although he doesn't say anything, that he's thinking, it might have been. And here's the toast.
Thank you, Claire, for those wonderful words about our good friend Dusty. Bill, why don't you come on up? Bill Daly. Again, like many of the people here, an original member of this wonderful faculty. Unfortunately, never, as I remember, Bill, you didn't play on that Osprey squad that Ralph put together.
I wasn't good enough to get on.
Yeah, you.
The word in the early going.
Okay, Jack.
Given the lateness of the hour, I think I shall surprise everyone and seek the brevity award. And I'll try to achieve that by eliminating from my comments all of the sexual innuendo that had been so prominent in the comments of the people who preceded me. In large part because, having been raised in the rural Midwest, I had no idea what you guys were talking about. I just want to pay tribute to an old warrior for his unfailing courage. 26 years of it, before he had the protection of tenure, after he had the comforts of tenure, and into his golden years, and still in trouble. This is a guy who has never ducked a just fight, even when there was a great deal of personal danger in it for him, and perhaps especially when there was a great deal of personal danger in it for him. Ralph Bean has guts, and guts is enough.
Thank you. Always right to the point. I'm told that John Sinton, you have a letter to read from someone who could not be here.
Hello, Dusty. My name's Billy. I'm the one who didn't give. I'm here to wreak vengeance. I'm reading a letter from Jim Hollis, who writes this: Dear Stockton friends, as I cannot be with you in person, I have asked my friend Stephen to read the tribute. I had asked Stephen to read the tribute to Ralph, but as Stephen has problems with my polysyllabic words, I have asked Sinton to do. Just the other day I was in Sea Wing and heard the stentorian voice rumbling down the corridor. I thought it might be fabled Diogenes with his lantern still in search of an honest president. But it was Ralph looking for someone to say something nice about him. I am pleased to join that august group of those who praise Ralph So now there are two of us, Ralph and me. As you all know, Ralph is a very modest man. If you really know Ralph, you know he has much to be modest about. We always knew the high point of the semester had been reached in Ralph's math classes, that moment when he could use the word radical. After that, it was all downhill toward 1s and 2s on the student evaluations. Even rational and irrational numbers had lost their erotic charm. That was the point in each semester when he decided that his true calling was to be an advisor to chief executives. Advice which was always warmly received. Interestingly, his advice has thus far lasted longer than those executives and is likely to do so in the future. In addition to serving as chief counsel to sundry presidents, Ralph turned to carpentry. I once made the mistake of letting him into my house for walls came down, walls went up, and I haven't seen my wife or dog since that time. Although I do hear muffled voices from time to time. In one case, he carved a perfect parabolic arch between rooms, a feat of sawtooth calculus of which he was quite proud. We were too until we realized that he had left open the shower stall to the street. It wasn't so much our modesty which was offended, but those cold showers contributed greatly to our present arthritis. As a result of Ralph's carpentry and parabolic arches, we now suffer math anxiety as well as... Ralph also became a professional mediator. Armed with his success in marriage, the high regard of consecutive presidents, and being an Eagles fan these many years, Ralph proffered his sage counsel to the public. As the divorce rate in South Jersey skyrocketed, Ralph's fame grew. Today he is winning new laurels as the mediator for Messrs. Trump and Wynn. Yet, when I consider that what Ralph said about Stockton almost always proved to be wise, compassionate, and true, I am honored to be his friend. I think friends like this will be very helpful to me in the future, if in the future I wish tax write-offs from his stock market tips, or wish to ensure a divorce or other litigation, or even if I am summoned to offer advice to any chief executive anywhere. Be well, Ralph.
Two more speakers, and then we get to our musical interlude that is much waited for. I believe the next speaker is Mike Frank, who is going to come to roast or to toast. You make your choice, Mike. A little both. That is Joe Walsh going outside. Joe always used to leave faculty meetings. Joe, the volume on existential phenomenology is in the trunk of my car if you're looking for it.
It's a nice tradition. I thought I'd just tell you a very brief story about Ralph in his early days of mediation training. I don't even know if Mary Ellen knows about this story. Ralph met a young couple in their early 20s. They were having tremendous problems. They were fighting a lot. They were at each other's throats. The young guy went and met Ralph in his office, and he confessed to Ralph that he wanted to kill his wife. Ralph knew a little bit about marital problems, he understood the problem, and he very seriously said to this young man, listen, it's nothing you can't work out, try. And the guy said, no, absolutely not, I have to kill her. Ralph said, well, okay, here's what you have to do. You can kill her. I know a way you can kill her, and you'll never, ever get caught. You have to have sex with her 3 times a day, every day, for 4 weeks. I suspect Mary Ellen may have advised him about this. I'm not sure. At any rate, Ralph goes by this kid's house about 3 weeks later, and there sitting on the porch is this little old weazened man with white hair, rocking, his hands are shaking, he looks ancient, and Ralph sees him, he says, this is the kid, this is the guy. And out from the house comes his wife in a little tennis dress, and she pops off to go play tennis, perfectly happy, and the kid says to Ralph, and she doesn't even know she's dying. Ralph has come a long way. He's in fact a little bit long in tooth. It's not that he's getting old, but there are some things in his life now that are telling of the signs of age. And I sort of made up a quick David Letterman list of the top reasons why we know Ralph is getting old. For example, all the names in his little black book have MD at the end of them. The gleam in his eye is primarily from bifocals glinting in the sun. His favorite part of the newspaper is 50 years ago today. He looks forward to a dull evening at home. His mind makes contracts his body can't possibly keep. He likes to sit in his rocker, but has a very hard time getting out of it. He has much too much room in his house, but his medicine cabinet is completely full. He tries to sing Sally Miguel at poker, but forgets the words. His back goes out more than he does. Lastly, he knows all the answers, but nobody asks him the questions anymore. As old as ornery as Ralph is terrific. I love him, and I think most of us do. I'm happy and proud to count him as a dear friend.
Elaine Inguli is our next presenter, Elaine. And the musical ensemble group, do you want to start getting ready, or should we wait, or what?
And one is, I played Scrabble with Ralph when he was union president. I really thought he had nothing to do. I mean, that was the only explanation, and I thought that no one but me would play Scrabble with him, because he was always bugging me to play Scrabble. And here I am tonight, and everyone here has played Scrabble, except for the people who play racquetball or poker or, pool or whatever else you do. So that can't be the explanation. And it must be what Mary Ellen told me, that Ralph felt sorry for me, because he thought I didn't have any fun in my life. And so he asked me to play Scrabble so that I would play Scrabble, because he thought that I should have fun. And it was fun, despite the fact that Ken stole what I was really going to say, that is, I think he might cheat, because how else could he win all the time? I've never lost in Scrabble to my husband, and I've never won in Scrabble with Ralph, but it's fine. The other thing is, I think he knows a lot, because about a month ago, we were sitting at lunch, there was a whole bunch of us, and somebody had this cockamamie idea about, and I don't do math, so I don't have this right, but that somehow, if you have a group of about 30 people, probability meant that probably 2 of them would have the same birthday. And Ralph wanted to bet, because I sat there and said, this is really stupid, this can't possibly be true, I don't get it. There's 365 days in the year, and that is not possible. But there was this second voice in me that said, Ralph's always right. Even when it seems like he's not, and when it seems totally crazy, he's right, so don't bet money on this, because you'll be a fool. But I said, well, let's just do it, without betting. And so Ralph says, well, my birthday's August 13th, and the next person at the table was me, and that's my birthday. And as usual, Ralph was right, and thank God for that. We love you, Ralph.
Ralph, as you've heard, a lot of references to Ralph's Scrabble abilities. The only guy I know that can also do Mayan hieroglyphics, Aztec quipus, and Esperanto all in one Scrabble game in order to win. I've been asked, before we get to the music, that Bennett, our SFT rep from up north, who has a 2-hour trip and is standing in for Tom Worth, who's missing, we don't know what happened to Tom. You want to come up and say a few words on behalf of the union?
Tom's out of the cabin.
And Joe Walsh is now in the back of the room, in case anyone was wondering.
I'm the emissary from the north of the Mason-Dixon line. I know Ralph doesn't have much sympathy for me having to drive all the way down here since he's spent many hours in the car driving north. But I have to say, I only know Ralph 10 years, and the way I see it, I don't know him long enough to say anything bad about him, but I know him too long to say anything good about him. Well, actually, that's not exactly right. But the only negative comment I would make is that, well, you've already heard that he has a reputation of being terse when he writes memos, and I have to just tell Ralph, probably for the last time, that when you want to file a grievance, it's not sufficient to say the union grieves, period. And one thing that I really found remarkable is that not that long ago he found, I guess, a yearbook of Stockton faculty from, I don't know if it was from the very, very beginning, but it was from early in the history of the college, and he posted all the photos outside the union office, and he put X's over the photos of those who were no longer there, and having a sense of history, it looked like the Lenin, like the Central Committee of the Communist Party after Stalin got through with it, you know. I mean, all these casualties, but Ralph looked nice in his sideburns. And just wanted to tell you that. It's kind of a personal note. He looked nice in sideburns. The other thing was, if you go, you know, I've been to all the union offices, the 9 locals of the council, and there's only one union office in which the charter, the original charter of the local, is prominently displayed. And I'm sure that just partly because of Ralph's dedication, and it has him and Tom, and you probably could tell me the third person, that was the original charter members of the Stockton local. And certainly the AFT has been a significant factor in Ralph's life, and the AFT certainly owes a tremendous amount of gratitude to Ralph. And on behalf of the council and Tom Worth and Nick Yavnello and Marco Lacatina and Barbara Horner and Don Silverman, you know, we're here to honor Ralph and to say, as they say in French, la lutte continue. Thank you, Ralph.
The time has come for the musical group. The ensemble is getting together. I don't know how you're making your arrangements. And then after that, Ralph will have a chance to take his shot. And
we've heard a lot about some of the virtues of Ralph tonight. His honesty, his courage, his creative resistance, his goodness, his guts, his steadfastness. So it seemed to us that we should sing to a virtue that's not normally recognized in this.
Baby face, he's got the cutest little baby face. There is no other one can take the place of baby face. My whole heart is jumping, he sure has started something, baby face. I'm up in heaven when I'm in his fond embrace. I didn't need a shove, 'cause I just fell in love with his pretty baby face. Baby face, he's got the cutest little baby face. There is no other one can take the place of baby face.
music, Sherman. Sherm is going to sing.
Before really nice about Ralph. First, I want to acknowledge the fact that there's only one person in this room that's older than Ralph, I think. And I got a lot older waiting to come up here. Everyone thinks Ralph, everyone's been saying Ralph's a nice guy. Let me tell you a couple things about my relationship with Ralph. I don't think Ralph ever knew exactly what to make of me. And I didn't like that. You see, it all started on the day that I came to campus. I think it was in June, a little before the semester started, but in June of 1972. And Ralph had been there, as you've heard, for a few months before that. And he had to have been already in difficulty with the administration. Because I came there looking for my office, and you heard about Woody Fromley, the Vice President of Academic Affairs at the time. Woody Fromley says, "You get your key from Ralph." I told him to give you the key. Now, it was a key to one of the few offices in B Wing, if you remember, that had a window. And Ralph had to give me the key to his office, which was right next door to Bill Daley's. So that, from that day on, I don't think Ralph particularly liked me, or for that matter, trusted me. He didn't know who the heck I was or what that was all about. Well, I don't think he ever forgave me for it. And I think it's probably the only explanation I could find, and I would challenge anybody in the room to find an explanation for why it was when I ran for a second term as union president, Ralph didn't support me. I think that was probably the only reason. He didn't trust me. Didn't know what the devil I was all about. After all, it was a period of time when I used all of my skills, all of my diplomatic skills, all of my diplomatic tools to make sure that Ralph would find the propitious moment to be silent. Well, but I think the straw that probably broke the camel's back came after several of Ralph's very, very successful appearances on the stage of Stockton's theater. So proud was he, so certain was he, so full of himself, that Ralph auditioned for a major role as the father, if you remember Ralph, in Stockton's production of Jules Feiffer's Little Murders, only to learn that he lost that role to this gray eminence. And that wasn't enough. How he must have gloated when on opening night I was writhing in pain with a kidney stone across the street in a hospital bed while the director read the part. Let me tell you a few other things about Ralph Bean. You've heard them. He's gutsy, he's brave, he's courageous, he's bright and articulate. Like a Hercules, he carries and has carried the weight of Stockton on his shoulders, always sensitive to total faculty, but also individual faculty needs. Ralph's a person of tremendous integrity, and I'm very, very proud to have been associated with him. Now for the psalm. Some of you know it. Join in with me if you do. Made a few variations at the end that may be appropriate, but it goes something like this. Oh, the Lord looked down from his holy place, said, Lordy me, what a sea of space, what a spot to launch the human race. So we build him a boat for a mixed-up crew, with eyes of black and brown and blue. And that's how come that you and I got just one world with just one sky. For it's the same boat, brother. We're in the same boat, brother. And if you shake one, then you're gonna rock the other. It's the same boat, brother. Oh, the boat rolled on through storm and grief, o'er many a rock and many a reef. What kept them going was a strange belief that you had to learn to navigate, 'cause the human race is special freight. If you didn't want to be in Jonah's shoes, you better be mates on this here cruise, 'cause it's the same boat, brother. We're in the same boat, brother. And if you shake one, then you're gonna rock the other. It's the same boat, brother. Oh, the boiler blew on one sad day, and the blast was heard down Ralph Bean's way, and stuff poured out to everyone's dismay. Oh, it took some time for the crew to learn what's bad for the bow ain't good for the stern. If a blast takes place in Upper K, Stockton's Hall's gonna blaze away, 'cause it's the same boat, brother. We're in the same boat, brother. We gotta live with each other in that same boat, the very same boat, brother.
Ralph Bean, Golfer of the Year.
I'm wearing tonight India LaFleur's medallion. It's St. George slaying the dragon. And that's always what Ralph was for both Indy and me, because if ever there were two ladies in distress at Stockton, it was Indy LaFleur and me. And I'd like all of us to think of all the Stockton people that we've known. One of the agonies of teaching at Stockton is we have wonderful, wonderful colleagues, and not all of them get to stay. So I'd like us all to think of those. Why Ralph and I are friends. I mean, I'm a very soft-voiced woman, as you all know, and Ralph is hard of hearing, and I think that's probably why. Such good friends for all these years, and of course one of the things that we do is we play Scrabble, and one of the things that I've always, well, this was 2 weeks after Indy died, and Ralph came up in his truck, and he came up with his tool chest, and he came up with his Scrabble set, and Ralph and I sat on the porch, and we finished a bottle of gin between us. I'm sorry, Mary Ellen, we did. And we played 5 games of Scrabble. We didn't talk, we played Scrabble. We hadn't played Scrabble together for 4.5 years, and we didn't need to talk, but we needed to play Scrabble. And that's what we did for that entire weekend. And I felt wonderful when Ralph left. Now, Ralph also plays Scrabble with Stephen. Claire, Ralph is not the world's best Scrabble player. It is I. And one of the things I've discovered playing Scrabble with Ralph is that occasionally he'll try to make a word like VA. And I'll say, VA. And he'll say, it's in Stephen's dictionary. And I'll say, oh. And I asked Stephen, does this happen with you, Stephen? Does he try to make words and say, well, it's in Penny's dictionary? Of course it does. And another thing about Ralph, those of you who play with Ralph at school, is that whatever dictionary Ralph is using at school, they're always little dictionaries. They're always strange dictionaries that I think he got in grocery stores. And he puts down a very peculiar word and then is shocked, I tell him, shocked that it's not in the dictionary. And he'll say, this is a very, very bad dictionary. Now, I've known Ralph for a long time, and I know that one of the things that Ralph really hates are plaques. But I wanted to have a little remembrance of this evening for him. So this is Stephen's and Penny's. You'll notice, Ralph, that ZA is in there with 3 separate definitions. Also, Lori Green wrote a poem about Scrabble. Mary Ellen tried to read it, and I tried to read it. It's really beyond the two of us, simple women such as we are. So there's some copies for those of you who like to read it, and also there for you, Ralph.
Penny or Paul, I know, did Joe Rubens have something? Oh, Michael address that? Okay.
What I'd like to do is I wrote some lyrics to a song called "I'm Beginning to See the Light," and so we're gonna do the little intro first, and then I'll sing that.
I never talked much to legal guys, but now that this suit is in my eyes, I'm beginning to see the light. I never went in for laying low or silently watching when I know, but now that my lawyers told me so, I'm beginning to see the light. Used to wander through the halls, speaking out and making calls. Then they tried to bust my balls, and I can't say nothing now. I never thought writing
the amount of time seems enormous. But really, in all seriousness, I have no idea how Ralph has managed to represent us, the faculty, so strongly and so faithfully and with so much courage for so many years. You know, being a union president has been an eye-opening experience, and you know, I just have to say that, along with everyone else, and I think that I speak for everyone in the union, that I'm proud that he is our leader. I'm proud to be able to work with him. I think we're fortunate, I'm fortunate, I should say, to be able to learn from him. And I'm certainly glad that he's still the vice president. And finally, I'm glad to be his friend. So as we continue to struggle for an effective faculty voice, fair working conditions, and protection of rights, I'm glad that Ralph is on our side and not theirs. I would just like to present this plaque. I know that Ralph hates plaques, apparently, but we do have this plaque which says, the Stockton Federation of Teachers Toast and Roast Dinner in honor of Ralph Bean, our dear friend and colleague, for all he has done to enrich and empower our lives. And Paul Lyons is who has sort of initiated this and is going to end here, I guess, and introduce Ralph.
Hi, folks. I know it's late and all the rest of that. Like the Academy Awards, we actually have about 12 more acts. We have a rhythm and blues combo. We have a Zydeco group that's coming, and Tom Worth is on his way shortly. Just to give you a sense of where we were going, we had other songs, just to give you a little piece of that. One was, when you're searching where is Bean, Ralph's playing Scrabble, and he's from heaven. For this game he's really keen, Ralph's playing Scrabble. He is a mathematician, in class he can wing it, and when it comes to Vera, we know he can zing it. When you're not playing racquetball, Ralph's playing Scrabble. You get the idea. One song. Second song we had was fairly predictable. What's a word with X? Ralphie. Can it be triple letter, triple word? Is that all it scores when you add it up, Ralphie? Are you holding out as you have done before? And so on and so forth. I don't want to say much more. This has been a wonderful evening. I was talking to Dave Emmons early on in the evening, and when Dave and I were rookies, we remember, I think at that point we were commuting with Jan Colin from Philadelphia, which were wonderful commutes. The rule in the car was a one-beer rule, except for Jan, who had a hollow leg. And usually on the way home we had to make a stop so Jan could pee. And one evening there was a dinner for Jerry Enscombe. And I remember Dave and I were probably in our second or third year at the college, and we sat along the back watching the Mayflower faculty. And we looked at each other and we said, that's a wonderful feeling. And we want to enter that. We want to enter that world. It's a wonderful sense of community at Stockton. One of the things I feel tonight is no longer along that wall. And as part of that, Stockton, I think the nicest thing about this evening, I think a number of people have referred to it, is we're not just here honoring Ralph, we're also honoring the community we've helped to create here at Stockton, which Ralph is a very special part of. And the only thing I want to say is, and this is from Fred Mensch, who I don't think made it tonight, but Fred is a special person in all of our lives, and Fred gave me the key to this, and after this I really wish Ralph would, if he wishes to come up and say something, but Fred basically gave me the slogan that I now have in my door. It's non-illegitimus carborundum, and it means don't let the bastards get you down. And if there's any slogan that embodies Ralph Bean, it's that. So with that, I know Ralph doesn't like plaques. I don't know how he feels about t-shirts, but we got a t-shirt for Ralph. It's a t-shirt that says, Toast and Roast, Ralph Bean, November 21st, 1997. And on the back, it's kind of a little, he makes a racket. And then a whole series of references to things that he does. But I'd like Ralph to come up here and accept this as a token of our appreciation. Let's give him a round of applause.
Everything I want to say, of course, is thank you. This is wonderful.
Can't hear you.
What I said was thank you, and I want to say that over and over. This has been wonderful. I feel so good. I have so many friends. You know the story Mary Ellen told earlier about I was always the new kid at school. I went to 20 schools before I got out of high school. And I was always the new kid. And that incident where the kids said they liked me was very special. But of course it doesn't come anywhere near tonight. I do have some particular comments to make to a few of my friends. You heard Penny talk about what Susan Matthews said to her about my voice on the pillow when you wake up in the morning. Susan did say that to Penny, I gather, but Penny didn't tell me that until Susan was long gone. And of course, Susan was beautiful. She was a dancer. But she was long gone. Thanks, Penny. Tony remarked that after he left Stockton, he went to work for the statewide union. At the time, I was the vice president of the statewide union and chaired the committee that ended up hiring him. And that was a hard job to get that committee to hire Tony. Because we already had Tom Worth from Stockton, and they wanted to spread around the work to other people. But I knew, ultimately I could prevail and get them to hire Tony. And Tony, I think, thought that I was doing that because he's so competent. I got his office the day he walked out of Stockton. I do have to say that the members of the committee who finally acceded to my wishes later told me they were very glad they did. Tony was very good as a staff rep. John Seawright talked about his early days here. I do remember my coup. I've had several coups. But I saw John quite early on in his tenure here and immediately roped him into working in the union, going to meetings, going to negotiations, and ultimately becoming president of the local. And I do remember going up to council, statewide council, and telling people that John was the new president. Some of them had met him at negotiations, but they immediately took him over in the corner and quizzed him on how he managed to oust me. And of course, those locals upstate don't realize that what we do best here is find replacements, because the work has to be spread around. John was my very first real coup. Mike's my most recent coup. And what a great coup that is as well. I do remember Stevens joining the union. He talked about it, and the fact of the matter is, it was Lois. I used to put out lists of the union members and lists of the non-members, and one day Stephen took one of those lists home, and Lois said, you don't belong on this one, you belong on that one. Stephen joined the union. Ken talked about me cheating. Come on, I never cheated anything. Sometimes a little creative with the English language, but the language is growing. Right? And I try to help it grow. Ken was John's coup. John got Ken to be president of the union, and John was ready to quit doing that. But I do remember a year or so after John first got Ken to do it, John and I went out to dinner. We used to do that once in a while. We still do now and then. But I do remember when Ken heard we'd gone out to dinner, he was terror-stricken, thinking we were doing a coup, a palace coup to get rid of him. And we just went out because we were friends. And Ken was doing a wonderful job. But the fear was there. David, I just never knew you could kill so many analogies in one statement. I mean, that sailing and sailing and sailing, I just felt I was being punned to death. Cindy talked about the joy she has just at us gathering ourselves together, and I certainly support that. I'm delighted that I'm a good excuse for this occasion, and we should somehow try to find good excuses for these occasions, because these occasions are wonderful. Just us getting together, so many people that like each other. That's wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. My sisters reading letters from my children and Jesse. I thank you. I didn't know they were writing. I didn't know they were going to be here. I didn't even know my sisters were going to be here. They flew in for the occasion from Pittsburgh, for those of you who didn't know. The letter from Adrian I thought was particularly interesting because his perception and my perception differ. I can remember getting him nails. In fact, one time we were building a deck one summer for somebody, and the deck had 9 support beams going across where we were laying planks on them. And what we discovered was we were both racing from one end of the deck so that each one of us would be the first one to get in the center and put in that extra nail. Both trying to save the other one some work. It was a delightful experience for having both of us to work together during carpentry. Claire, who's my newest Scrabble opponent, knows more words than anyone I have ever met. The problem is, in Scrabble, putting down a very clever word is not the object of the game. The object of the game is to win. And so Claire does very clever and interesting words, and I've learned never to challenge them because she's right. But she puts them down in ways that enable me to build something that I can win with. So that's fun. Bill, you say you didn't play on our basketball team because you had no talent?
That's
you don't realize none of us had any talent. We just played because we felt like it, and it was fun. But our teams were, not particularly talented, just people that, and you would have been welcome if you hobbled on out there. I want to thank John for reading Jim Hollis's letter. As always, Jim, very, very intelligent and interesting and funny, and I appreciate that. age, than you can imagine. But I do remember telling Mike one time after a racquetball game, which apparently he won, that he should just wait until he was my age, and I was his age, and we'd see. Elaine made a little mistake when she talked about our little thing at the lunch table about 2 birthdays being alike amongst any 30 people. What actually happened was she gave her birthday first. And I said, that's a bingo. But she didn't believe me. I had to show her my driver's license. I appreciated the barbershop quartet, or what wasn't it?
The barbershop quintet.
Quintet, yeah. And when they were introduced, I remember Tony saying these people were going to come and make fools of themselves, and for once Tony was right. I had actually forgotten that Sherm took my faculty office when I had to move out of B-Wing. Bjork was the president of the college at the time, and he insisted that the union president could only have an office in the union office. And faculty, even though the person continued to teach a full load and was a faculty member, they couldn't have a faculty office. And so I spent that couple of years as union president in J-Wing, right across the hall from several administrators. They kept good tabs of me, I think, in that time. To our friends from 195, I do thank you for the plaque. It's true that I don't go looking for plaques. I'd much rather have T-shirts if I can wear them. But I'm glad you came, and I appreciate your remarks. And of course, we do have need to work together. We are in this together. We're unions, and solidarity is what we need and work for. As I already said, Mike is another coup of mine. I think Mike has been, so far, a fantastic union president. And,
You didn't make it any easier for him, Ralph.
No. Mary Ann was another one of my coups who is here.
Maria's coup.
Pardon me?
Maria Teskey's coup. I was Maria's coup.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I will take credit,
Okay.
but you can take the credit.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I want to close the way I began, being thankful. This has been a wonderful, wonderful evening for me, and I thank, well, it was Paul's idea, I think, Paul's original idea, but a lot of people jumped in on it and did it. Paul and Mike and Ken, of course, and Bridget doing the food, and Penny. I can't thank you enough. I thank you all. And I thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Ralph.